Welcome, everybody, to the 2 by 2. It's a Friday. It's a beautiful Friday here in Austin, Texas. And I am lucky to be doing two things. First is obnoxiously avoiding South by Southwest. And the second is talking to Joe Griffith, who is a consultant in our Keenan Reed network, but more importantly, a really creative entrepreneur and a perfect example of the pattern of entrepreneurial passion that I see flowing through this amazing community of independent consultants. So, welcome, Joe. How are you?
Thank you. Doing great. Yeah, glad it's Friday.
Yeah, yeah. So Joe has he's like Clark Kent, Superman. Which one am I looking at now? Is this the Clark Kent, and then the Superman's the other one?
Yeah, something like that.
So he runs and is the founder of Wander, New Mexico, which is a food tour business in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which has been running for 10 odd, 11 odd years.
This will be 10 years. Yeah,
10
this year.
years, all while advising big companies on important things. The food tour to me, honestly, today is a little more interesting. So that's where we're going to focus. Let me start with bike tours, San Francisco. Let's go back in a time machine. San Francisco, 2015. You were at Bain and your wife was at McKinsey. So let's pause and imagine those stereotypes for a second. Got it. And now what was the reality?
Let's see. We were living in a small apartment in North Beach, beautiful view looking south back over the city. This sounds cheap these days, but back then, a decade ago, for 800 square feet, 2-bedroom apartment, it was $4,000 a month, which, we just felt like, wow, this money, we were renting it, right? So there's, almost $50,000 a year just going nowhere. And every weekend, when we finished work, stopped making slides and would close our laptops, we'd get in the zip car. I don't know if they still have a zip car, but we would leave the city, drive north across the Golden Gate Bridge and go spend time, riding bikes in wine country or hiking along the coast. And so we pretty quickly realized, well, not quickly, over the course of, being there for a year or two, 2 years. Why are we paying $4,000 a month to live next to work? If we really want to be out somewhere a little small, like in a smaller town, more rural, have some hiking nearby, all of that. So the picture was, kind of realized after a couple of years of that, hey, let's try something different. We got engaged and started working on planning our wedding, which was going to be in Santa Fe, which is where we live now. We do have some ties, and I can tell you about how we ended up here, but that's how it all started. It was just, wow, we're paying all this money to live next to work. What if we just thought a little bit more broadly about where we actually want to live and what that might look like?
Was that okay? I want to go back to the Bain and McKinsey connections. Was that a normal line of thinking back then? Like, were people starting to realize, okay, wait a second, I don't have to do it here? This is pre-pandemic. Remote work existed, but not in the same way. Consulting the structure of it was a bit different than it is. Were you guys oddballs, or was this something that you had seen others do?
Yeah, this was 2016, 4 years before COVID. So I guess we were trendsetters a bit. I think now it's less of an oddball thing, but back
Yeah.
then it was an oddball thing. And I think there was the beginning of the disillusionment with tech back then. A little, it was still very cool to go and work at Facebook or a big tech company, but it was sort of the beginning of where we're at now, I think. And I was just reading an interesting article about. Do you remember that TV show Silicon Valley? Did you ever watch that on HBO?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Middle out.
yeah. So that's the era of when we lived in San Francisco, when it was kind of fun and quirky and weird. And there was this article this week about how Silicon Valley is portrayed in Hollywood, and how times have changed. So
Was
I know it
this the
wasn't a
one with
question, but
no, was this one with the Silicon Valley infographic where the logos had changed on the credits? Do you remember the
yes,
cartoon
yes,
credits? Yeah, I read that.
that's the article.
So it had started. Yeah, I remember this. Okay, so this was about the same time actually that my husband and I started our real estate development side gig.
Well,
So yeah, about the same time where we were like, okay, I think we could kind of make it or do something on the side. On the other side, I mean, we were already a bunch of side people to make it work. All right, so you end up. Did you have an idea of Wander, New Mexico and food tours when you guys left, or was it more organic?
I had an idea. Yeah. So I knew I wanted to do something in tourism. At the time, so I was a case team leader at Bain, I'd had one prior dabble in entrepreneurship, which I can tell you about. that informed a little bit of how I'd approached this. That was in my Dubai days, which let's go back to 2012 to 2014 for that. But I remember sitting. So I quit first, and I don't know if they still have this, but back in the day, I think Bain and McKinsey would basically pay you a nice
Yeah.
severance to leave.
Yeah. They
And
did it
so I
at
think I
BCG
was
too.
yeah. And I can't remember if it was 12 weeks or 16 weeks paid. And mine, however, I don't know how, I think I was just kind of done. And I was like, all right. So I got it first. And my wife was still going to work every day at McKinsey. And so I would pull my lawn chair down to the park in North Beach in front of the church there. And I think they had Wi Fi. And so I just take my laptop down and like started doing research on and building a business plan. And you do a lot of mechos at Bain. And so I think I thought of the mecho of the industry in New Mexico. And, back then this pre is, the shale wasn't as big as it is now. So I think state government was number one, and pretty quickly you get to tourism being the number two industry, at least in Santa Fe. And so I thought, okay, well, I don't want to go into government. Tourism seems like the thing. We had just come back from, and where we got engaged was in New Zealand, and we'd went on this. I think it was the second or third time we'd done this, like this kind of multi-day bike packing tour where they move your luggage and you get to bike between cities. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. Really thought, oh, well, New Mexico's very rural, and like, wouldn't it be cool to have a bike? Never really, I'm sure they have this in the US somewhere, but it seemed, down the places we've
Yeah.
done, it's always been abroad. So I started working on that. And then the two things I realized is, and I still don't, even though I've gotten more and more handy over the last 10 years, I have no idea how to do any work on a bicycle, and just always feel super. When you go into a bike shop, to get it
Yeah.
repaired, like you feel kind of self-conscious talking to the repair person about like, well, what is it that you need, and like, and they're using all this like fancy jargon and lingo, and I just
Yeah.
that's a whole. And I realized pretty quickly like you can't get into a bike business if you don't know anything about bikes.
No, it's like a
Um,
granola mechanic shop. Like the Green Party took over. Like, there's a, you walk in, you're
yeah.
like, okay, now I'm awkward for two reasons.
Yep, yep. So that quickly kind of went out, and then I can't remember exactly how it had come up. We did go on a food tour, in New York, probably like 2013, maybe, like when they were just they're not as big as they are now. And I'd argue maybe we're past peak food tour, but I thought, hey, I love food. I was really into Anthony Bourdain and restaurants, and also I was a history minor in college, and so Santa Fe is a place of deep history. Thousands of years of human history, 400 plus years of European history here. And so the vision was like, well, what if I could take the presentations and storytelling from like putting together a board presentation and slides and the structure of that, but then put that in with a food tour and take people to different restaurants, and also use it as a chance to kind of scratch the itch of all my interest in just food, right? So this is a way to kind of combine all of those things. So that was what the plan quickly, pivoted to, and got on the ground. Got married in September. I think it was 2016. It's 2015 or 2016. Got married in September, went on our honeymoon, came back, moved into, when we first got here, we were living in a travel trailer at an RV park on the outskirts of town for the first couple of months, and started working on the business. Worked on it half at the library. And then at the time, Whole Foods here had a bar inside of it. I think they have this in Austin too, so you probably know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, so I'd worked on it. We had our savings, I guess, from consulting, but we didn't have any income, and so going to Whole Foods was like a nice place to, it's like the original co-working space. Get a beer, get a little bit of food, and then 10 years later, here I am.
Did you consider the change in income? Like, how did you guys think about the money? Because two, like, project leading MBB consultants, despite the high cost in San Francisco, are still raking it in at a relatively young age. Shifting, I know major change in cost of living, but the revenue chain there, which did your wife stay at McKinsey, or how were you guys? Did you not care? Were you like willing to go in the bike shop and eat the granola? Like, what was the mental framework around the
Yeah, I think it was a factor, right? I mean, so that's one of the reasons we moved. Like, San Francisco is great. We thought for a minute about Boonville, some of the places north of San Francisco, like, oh, does it ever make sense to live in one of these places? And you kind of think about cost of living, and it pretty quickly gets ruled out. So I think the extent of the thinking was, we've got a bunch of savings. Let's like move to New Mexico. My wife had some family here, so it wasn't like just totally out of the blue connections or anything. And so we didn't, she left McKinsey as well, did not, moved here without jobs. And I guess something about getting married, being young, you sort of feel like, hey, you could do anything, right? And so I'd say there wasn't a plan, and we didn't really think through, hey, we're going to need this amount. Like we just knew, let's go
You had
live somewhere where
confidence
we'll
in
be.
it. You're like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
the
yeah.
cost of
Okay.
living in Santa Fe is low enough. Like at first, after the RV park, we moved into an apartment downtown that was maybe 1,500 a month. I can't remember, but enough that the cost of living here is low enough that you can live a high quality life with, on very little. And so I do remember, a good, somebody, family member asked me when we first moved here, like, hey, have you thought through like, well, how much money are you going to need per year? And I remember telling him, I think 100,000 combined between my wife and I. And so we made more than that now. My wife's got a full-time W-2 job and the health insurance and all that stuff. But as I reflect back on that number, I kind of think, and it still is true to this day, it depends on your priorities in life, I guess, and what you want. But, and I think studies have shown this, there's like the base amount of
Yeah.
kind of funds and to live like comfortably. And then there, and you get very happy quickly, and then super diminishing marginal
The
returns
marginal
after that.
value of happiness after a certain point is next to nothing. Yeah,
Totally.
that's very true. It's
Yeah.
very true. I think too, let me pause for a second here because there's like a couple connections I want to make. Our stories are really similar.
Interesting.
When I left, the listeners know this because I go back to this pivotal moment in life. Like I left Dell, my choice. I took a voluntary buyout in the privatization in 2014. It was at the time I was engaged. My husband and I were engaged. My husband had gotten laid off. He had two kids, but the cost of our combined life went from two houses to one house. And he had this big suburban, ugly house, but it was perfectly fine and comfortable. I had a cool house and I put it, this is the rise of Airbnb. I put it on Airbnb a mile from downtown Austin and covered the mortgage and basically my entire monthly life. And then had this extra like at year that I had a, what do they call it? Burn rate. I had a year of burn rate on top of that to go from the package. I had a conversation with my dad who was like basically telling me, look, you're a grown up at this point. I don't think this is the right choice. It feels really risky, but good luck to you. And I thought to myself, all right, I feel like somehow I'm just going to solve this problem. Like, I feel like this is all going to work out. And I had I legit had no plan. At least you were like, I can run food tours. I was like, I have an Airbnb for bachelorettes in Zilker. Like, that was the extent of my plan. And I started like getting Texans will know this. I started getting the combo locos at HEB every week for like these two boys that all of a sudden I was half responsible for. Like, we were eating like, just like the lifestyle changed a little bit. But what ends up, let me place, this is the same for you. I know, because I know how successful you've been. Like people that are in this phase now, if you have this sound background, like you're going to figure your shit out. And if you play it forward 10 years, or in my case, 15 years almost, like good work just done consistently is compound growth. Like it's the Buffett theory. It's going to pay you and you're intelligent. You're going to put that money in good places and that's going to compound and grow. And when you're approaching 50, you're going to be well above that threshold where every dollar is a marginal return in terms of your happiness and contentment. So looking back on it, are you happy with this choice? Like, do you feel
Yeah.
like this was like you chose the other route and that all you're good with? You're happy you made that choice. Like, what would you imagine your life had been like if you had not made that choice?
I'd probably be a Bain partner, which I think could be a good life, right? I actually was more interested. I think as you get farther in Bain, the work gets better and more interesting. I don't like selling in BD, so that part would be a bit hard. But I don't know. It's interesting to think about sometimes. I mean, we'd probably still be living in the Bay Area somewhere, which is great. I mean, it could have been great. So I'm sure I'd be happy as well. A couple of thoughts I think on how living somewhere like Santa Fe, what you need ingredient wise to make it work, and then how it might be different if you choose to go freelancing in a big city. Before I get to that though, I had one recollection of what potentially made me more comfortable with taking the jump, or standing on the high dive or whatever, of like no income and kind of rethinking what do you want to do with your career. So I think as I reflect on my formative experiences growing up, one thing that made me very comfortable with living on limited money or no money is I did a lot of backpacking, both with people, and I did some like between my first job in Abu Dhabi and then when I went to go work for Bain, I think it was 3 months in South America solo. And if you've ever backpacked, the logic around your economics, completely change around like how much, you
I
have
s-
this budget and then, you
huh?
read like people living on, $20 a day, $30 a day. And you realize like
Easy.
if
I
you
did
really
it.
have to,
Yes.
yeah. So I think sometimes it's, especially when you get to be this, our age and you have kids and a house and, education bill, you can get locked into this system where like your frame of reference of expenses is pretty steep. I'm not saying I'm going to go backpacking next year, but like I think it's always important. You always want to stay, and I'm probably due for this soon. Mix things up and kind of stay fresh and make sure you keep your frame of reference unmoored from the reality of like day to day, professional life and our professional networks.
Yeah. Where did you go in South America?
So flew into Bogota and then ended at the kind of the southern edge on
Oh,
Santiago
wow. So
in
did you
Chile.
do the, like, what do they call it? The Via de los Andes or like the Carretera, like the whole highway thing, like Che Guevara?
Mostly, the only part that was not, so I flew and skipped over a bunch of the Amazon, mostly riverboat, but so the one leg on an airplane was from Iquitos, which is the
Hmm.
city, yeah, in Peru, which is the largest city in the world that's not accessible via road. I flew from there to Lima, and well, no, actually, it wasn't. Where was it? Yeah, I'd have to look back at the map. I prided myself in almost all of it was like overland, except for that one flight.
That's awesome. I lived a summer in Ecuador, in Quito, in
Hmm.
college.
Oh, nice.
We, every weekend, we'd have, 3 days of classes and then 4 days of weekend. And we traveled, backpacked all over Ecuador. This was in 2000. You hear a lot about Ecuador in the news back then. Like it was same and different. An American 20-year-old woman, blonde, loved beer, could travel by herself relatively safely. The entire, like that experience, I think this is a great point, actually. That experience of going and figuring it out on $20 a day in a totally different place. Were you fluent in Spanish when you went? Like, could you just get by?
I could get around. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I would say my C plus fluent.
Yeah. Okay. That's about where I was too. That I reference those frameworks of the events that happened in my head all the time today. When I was there, I was in Quito. I was living with a family. The entire city was besieged by, it was a political attempted coup, basically. The city was really besieged. Like they took the 5 highways and the people from the countryside, they blocked the roads with burning tires. And then everyone in a public sector role and all the transportation workers went on strike. So there were no buses, taxis, nurses, doctors. And what happened was that all of the people who had a pickup truck or a trailer were like, I'm gonna make some money. So they became the transportation mechanism. For 3 weeks, this went down. And I lived 4 miles from our university. We still had class. I would get, and you go stand out there with your thumb and these camionetas would stop and then they put people in the back. Now I had already realized before this that I didn't have to take the bus because it took $1 to take a taxi versus a dime for the bus. I was like, I can like pay for the maybe it was like $5. It was, I had it on a budget. So I realized I sat in the back of this, camioneta for a couple of days. And then I was like, I wonder if I just like, is my Spanish good enough to negotiate the front seat? So it it was, and so I would offer them, "Hey, instead of a quarter, can I just give you $1 and like I can sit up here and you take me right to my door?" And so of course they said yes, and like I go back to that all the time because I'm like, everything in this world is negotiable if you approach it with like a high value for where they are and a smile and like a little bit of a joke, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
and yeah,
totally.
I think it's awesome. My stepson just got back from a year and a half, like just doing this, and I think it's like the best thing for young people to do.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'll get back to Wander, New Mexico in a second. Do you think when you guys retire and kids are gone, you'll go back to this lifestyle, maybe like a little bit more comfortable? But would you do that again? Like be a little, do you have the itch to be free again?
Sometimes I think the big difference as you get older is community. And what surprises me, I know a couple of people that I, friends of ours, their parents, or just talk, when you meet people who's spend time, half in one place and half in the other. And I think I would want to travel for a good, a couple months out of the year. But the two complications that would prevent me from doing it on a really long basis would be I envision retirement. I think like socializing's quite important, and just having, people that you see on a pretty regular basis and play tennis with or go to dinner with or, do whatever with. And so I would have I think I would like to try and figure out how to have two communities, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then the other, now we have a dog who's 9.
The
And so,
dog, yes, the
yeah,
dog is
yeah.
I heard him.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So that, we've taken her, we drove her to California last, New Year's. And then we're talking about like some longer term, before my son gets too old, doing some, because we still do have a travel trailer now. We got a different one than the one we used to have. Some longer, like 2 or 3 month trips in the US. And there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do in the national parks and things in the West. So probably, but I do like having roots somewhere, which is completely
yeah,
different than the backpacking mindset of my 20s.
yeah. I think for me, I'm kind of my the vision in my head is 2 places, 2 routes, 2 groups. I worry about the community in this like, I would stay partially in Austin, right? But I worry about the community aspect in the other one. I think that is a real thing. And then some good 3 or 4 month stretches
Yeah.
of being loose before I'm 72, where you like the risk of falling, all of those things goes up. Or I'm still like physically capable of having fun and climbing mountains and doing those things. But the dog is a real factor. Mr. Patel and I have agreed this is our last dog for a while. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
we think he's got another 8 years. So we've got
Okay.
we don't love this
Fun.
dog, by the way. Like, just to be clear on Pete Patel, like he's a real pain in the ass. But Pete's gonna be the last dog. Okay, let's go back to Wander. So tell me about the first year. So you're going from slide making and first class to a trailer park, and now you got to meet people and show them where to find the best Sonoran hot dog. Like, what was the first year like at Wander?
Approach. So put together kind of we did a ton of research and developed a narrative for the tour, right? So I put together, I think it was like 10-page document of here's all the stops I want to take people to, and then these are the restaurants we're going to go to. So there's a bunch of like desk work and desk research. At the same time, I also had to go and get restaurants signed up. And now I'm going to bring in when I was living in Dubai in 2014, I think 2013, I was working on this idea. I think it was around, yeah, give or take a year or two. I had this, my first foray into entrepreneurship was called Yalla Eats. Yalla is like, if you speak Arabic, it just means like hello, or that doesn't necessarily means let's go, like yalla, like come on, let's move along. So I bought the domain, made a business plan, like I did all of this work, but it was Uber Eats. No, can't remember Uber. I mean, Uber Eats wasn't in Dubai then. There was a competitor, but it hadn't really taken off. And obviously, to make that work, it's a two-sided market, and so you need a bunch of restaurants in it, and then you have to sell the food to the customers, right? I never, ever, as part of working on that, went to a single restaurant to ask them to sign up because I was just like, oh, it's much easier to sit behind a computer, and
Mhm.
the logo. Anytime I talk to somebody who's thinking about entrepreneurship, I think there's a lesson and a nugget there. And like a lot of times people ask me like, oh, like what, should I make an LLC and how should I structure the business? And,
That's
you
so
know, I'm,
true.
yeah. And I'm like, well, hang on. Have you talked to any customers? And they're like, no. And it's always easier to work on the LLC than it is to actually do the thing. So how does this apply to Wander, New Mexico? I had to go out and talk to the restaurants. And I remember being very nervous for the first couple of meetings. I remember the very first meeting that I had was with Santa Fe Spirits. I think I sent an email or something, but we met for breakfast. And, you're always, as a consultant, like really nervous to go in without like slides or something. And
And you
so
get your posture right, right? Like, yeah.
so I remember making this like 1-page, like kind of brochure thing, and it was made at Kinko's, and it was, it was pretty cheap and janky, but it worked. And it was good. They agreed to be on the tour. And then another place I went to is a kind of third generation family owned New Mexican restaurant. I remember going to a fine dining place, and I can remember very clearly, like, because chefs, usually it's a chef that's kind of running the place, and you have to show up at a time before dinner starts, but they're there and they're not too busy. And a lot of times, they're like hey, I've got 2 minutes. Like, tell me what you need really quick. And so do cooking in the kitchen in the meantime. So the first year was really about, getting the product kind of created, getting the network of restaurants in place, building the narrative, and then starting the marketing. The first tour that I did, if for some reason I chose to launch the business, I hadn't really thought through like seasonality. So I chose to launch it in November. And it gets much colder in Santa Fe than most people realize. But I did a first tour with family and we took them around and, I paid out of pocket for that. And then I remember the first booking came in, came through Viator, which was like a TripAdvisor
Hmm.
related tour booking thing. And then the first couple of months were very slow. I mean, it was the worst time to launch a business. And then finally it started to pick up in the spring. Yeah, I mean, the first couple of years was just, great growth. Like, we were figuring out a lot of things and learning a lot of things, testing a lot of things. But from the first year of launching all the way up until 2020, I mean, it was, growing substantially year over year. And, really first 2 years or a year was about creating process and something that can be scaled. And then from there, it was just kind of like, hey, layer on another tour guide, like layer on another tour. Let's go to
Then
Albuquerque.
you knew what you were doing. We've been going through it. So again, on the consulting side of the business, not the two by two, it's been like a really challenging year in consulting. Like last year was just, it was a bloodbath. And we came out of it good. Got all of our, I call them slots, but I'm a merchandiser. So we got all our slots back and we've been growing. But last year I started thinking about, okay, I'm going to incubate these two new lines of business so that this can be scalable. And instead of going immediately to the 20 people who would love to hear from me, I made a deck and I built a spreadsheet and I did all of the things to hide behind. And then I called it a pilot. I called it a pilot because a pilot means it's okay that it's small and it's okay to sit there and test and be slow and do all of these things. And like, I think it's important that we all acknowledge that those of us that don't naturally sell or come from a sales background, even though we may be good at it, that like you don't have like no the person on the other side just wants to talk to you and hear from you. Like they really don't care. They're like 2 minutes, come in. You said this. Oh, cool. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Like let's just do it. And what we as I think this is especially a character trait and people out of MVB because we've all just been so trained to have the right posture, find the right place at the table that fosters the conversation but doesn't upset the hierarchy, right? Like make sure your slides are perfect. All of that perfection effort. Like it's just, you could throw it out the window when you're an entrepreneur. It does
Totally.
not matter one bit.
Totally.
So you were in pilot phase through the winter, let's call it that. When did you, and then it started to pick up. When did you really feel like, okay, this is going to work. Like I'm ready to start growing it. Like I feel comfortable with what's happening.
Oh, that's a good question. Can't remember a specific, the honest answer is pretty quickly I got distracted. So I was, launched the business in November. And then in the spring, Bain, when I left, they did like an offboarding interview, in San Francisco. And they're like, great, like, what are you doing? And I would imagine most people, were like, oh, I'm going to work at Facebook,
You're
or
like,
like,
I'm going to live in a trailer park.
and so I remember they're like, well, while you figure things out, here's this guy in Austin. Here's the contact info. You should send him an email. And I think he's always looking for consultants. It's a gig kind of thing, like contract. And this was 20 yeah, somewhere around 2016, give or take a couple months. Independent consulting was like, it's not like it is now, early days.
Yeah, nobody was doing it back then.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I sent him an email just because I think it was like something to do. I don't know. But in the spring of the following year after launching the business, I remember he sent a note and said he had a project. And, I was into food and liked Anthony Bourdain. And so the project was, it was a consulting project. It was the largest wine company in Canada, producer and distributor, all of that. And so I thought, wow, a project in wine, but is in Toronto and it required weekly travel to
How do you, what's the route? Dallas, Phoenix, Toronto?
Denver.
Like,
Spent a ton of time at the Denver airport, tons. So I'd leave on Sunday. So pretty quickly into, this is like probably like April, maybe. So like 5 months into the business. I remember my wife was maybe just about to get a job. And I think I took it because I was like, I mean, if it had been, something like I had been doing, like, go to market strategy for like a SaaS company, I probably would have passed. And maybe I still would have been led back to consulting. But the fact that it was just such a cool subject
Yeah.
matter. So long story short, I ended up working on the project for 6 months, going to Toronto every week, flying up there
Two
for six.
two time zones connected through Denver in the spring during storm season.
Yeah, but
Those of us
surprisingly,
have been there.
well, yeah, but see, so in the Mountain West, like, it's not Texas, so you're not getting these like there's just not
Okay,
afternoon.
so
Yeah,
I've got the Dallas connection for everything, and like
yeah, yeah,
April
yeah.
through Dallas is like just a
Mostly, I
disaster.
missed my flight like once in 6 months, and I had a friend in Denver, so I stayed with him. But um, so this did. So I remember like I would fly there on Sunday, and then I'd get back. Yeah, but I remember sometimes like getting back and then immediately going to give tours. And for a while, I was doing like 2 tours a day. Like I did, so I had a beer tour for a while. So I do a food tour and then a beer tour, and then I'd like be going back and forth and work on this consulting project. And I quickly found, so this wasn't the end of the tourism business. I mean, I kept it going, but I remember getting like because he would send paper checks in the mail and just being like, oh yeah, like this is tens of thousands of dollars for the work I've done, in one check. And then comparing that to what I was getting from the tourism business and just being like, yeah, I mean, I know I say you don't need that much money to live, but it sure is nice when it comes. So I kept growing the business, but quickly was like, all right, I got to find a way to hire some people, offload some things, start getting out of guiding potentially. So I built out a good network of a couple of tour guides. I found a part-time office manager, more or less, found a part-time social media manager. And I was kind of piecing out all like a lot of the expertise, and it worked. I mean, things were going pretty well, but I ran up until COVID because consulting was the income. I ran the business with an eye, like a lot of tech companies do, eye towards growth. I mean, we weren't losing money, but I was much more interested in year over year growth and building this scalable process than I was like how much profits dropping on this business at the end of the year.
Let me ask you a question. At this point, mindset wise, was this a revenue or profit stream for you or a game you were playing?
The original intent, was to grow it into something valuable, but there was yeah, I guess there was a game
Like,
aspect
I
to it.
should
Like,
maybe
it's
I'll
just,
say a puzzle to solve. It's not like a game in a
yeah, for
bad
sure,
sense.
for
Like
sure.
it's a was it more the reward was from the puzzle, not
Yeah,
from the dollar?
I think so. And not also part of the brand of like, claiming that you're an entrepreneur or a founder. I mean, I think the business I built, it is lasting and successful and I'm proud of it. But I mean, is it enough of a credential to get in the door to go work with like, quote unquote real founders, like somebody who's grown a $10 million, 50 million, $100 million business? Probably not, but it sure is a lot more of a credential than somebody who's like always consulted. And so
Yeah.
there are a variety of reasons I did it, but I think I'm glad to have it in my portfolio now because it is cool to talk about. And I think one thing I'd wanted to, one thing that's worth mentioning, and like we talked at the beginning about introductions and stuff, and a lot of the independents that I network with, they're really into this fishing line idea, which comes from this guy.
Yeah. David
And ever,
Fields.
oh my god, I don't believe in the fishing line necessarily. That's a whole nother story. But
Okay.
I have
Contrarian
I
view.
I have seen the power of anywhere we get, like you're out at a party or networking event and people are like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I own a food tour company. 99% of the time, like opens up this amazing
They let you in the front
conversation.
seat of the camioneta.
Uh, if I say, oh, I'm a, freelance, I own my own consulting business, 90% of the time people are like, oh, so what are you guys doing
Mhm.
this weekend?
Yeah, they're like, "Oh, that sounds super nerdy." Like, "Excuse me." Like,
Yeah.
"Well, goodbye."
Yeah. So it's a nice thing to have in the mix. I'm glad I did it. Would do it again for sure. But I think there's entrepreneurship's complicated. There's a lot of things to think about.
Do you think getting I would let me just say this. Do you think it's helped you with your consulting work? Like, in some sense not in some sense, like, you've literally been in the trenches. Like, you've had to run the tour fresh out of the airplane. You've had to grow the business. You had to hire people. I'm sure there was a lot of mistakes you made along the way, a lot of learnings that you had from doing what I'll call real work. Has that transferred back to the way you solve problems and help your clients?
I think so. Yeah, definitely. So in a way, you talked about like the perfection mindset that you have coming out of NBB. This was sort of like going to like a detox kind of you just cannot, like that meeting I talked about with the owner of Santa Fe Spirits and
Yeah.
not wanting to go in with like, wow, without slides and stuff. Like, so I spent, probably like like half a day preparing or a day because I wanted it all to be perfect. And you just you can't afford, like, you cannot, your business will not move at the speed you need. If you take the same mindset you take in preparing a presentation to the board of a $50 billion company about the acquisition of a $15 billion company, and you take that same mindset to like how you're approaching partners for your tourism startup.
Yeah.
So I think it helped. It was a bit of a detox on that. And then the other, I always tell, and this is getting into the weeds of how the business works, but a lot of times I like to tell people it's actually a marketing company that just happens to give food tours. And so I just learned a ton around, marketing and customer acquisition that I think has been helpful on a bunch of projects, even the one I'm looking at now or working on now. And then the third and final thing I'll say is I think and it's kind of related to the detox point. Just the like really scrappy mindset of like it's almost like Bain had this saying knows for value and like making sure that you're working on the biggest levers that will add value for a company. And this just takes it and like puts it to the max, right? Because you learn to having gone through the trial by fire of like launching and growing a business, you kind of learn how to be extremely, selective with your time and also how to like say no to a lot of things that won't help move the company forward and how to find the things that are going to, move the needle. So yeah, I think it is helpful, in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, I think so too. I think for me, I would agree with what you said. The translation for me is I've spent a lot of it's like my client work and the way that I run the consulting business have moved in parallel. My client work has been a lot around commercial and business model transformation. How do you move from a one way of making money to another way of making money? And then how do you turn that flywheel and have the whole business grow? The way that we structure Keen and Read is it's just a talent staffing arbitrage business, right? Like, and it's built around cash flow, including like when we get paid and when we pay, how we hire them. And the whole business is built around this business model, which is then fed now back into this other kind of set of products we're launching. I don't think I ever could have been as good at the enterprise business model work if I wasn't living managing cash flow myself, if I wasn't trying and failing at ways that new paths to revenue to to like say it professionally. It's like
Yeah.
if I wasn't piloting and and feeling those pain points, like I think there's really something to be said for a company looking for advisory and looking at an independent consultant who's done it, even no matter what it is. I don't care if it's food tours, newsletters, or consulting firms or pool company, whatever, it doesn't matter. Versus the guys and gals who are the MDPs and selling $10 million projects because there's something we know, something we felt they have never felt or know. So maybe that's a soft pitch for the industry, but I feel like it's really true. Um, well, great. I want to also compliment you. So the way Joe and I met was through a network, a mutual connection of both of ours who I've gotten to know over the years. I think it sounds like you found networking valuable. That's something I didn't do very well in the first 5 years of being an independent consultant. So I would just say thank you for being proactive on that and making the introduction. And I would encourage other people listening to this to not be a perfectionist about that, especially when it comes to other independents. I think we all kind of rise and find places for ourselves together.
Yeah.
So thanks, Joe. Where can you want let's direct them to when they're in Santa Fe? Who do they call for the best tours in
Yeah.
town?
Yeah, sure. The company is Wander, New Mexico. We this year, so I think last year was when we first made it. We're the number one, not just the number one rated food tour of all the things to do on TripAdvisor in Santa Fe of everything like hot air balloon tours, walking tours, ghosts, all the things you could possibly do. We're number one rated at the moment. So you can find our website, wandernewmexico.com. There's a phone number on the website that goes to my business partner, who's the tour guide. Her name's Lauren, lovely woman. So if you ever come to Santa Fe, really encourage you to take a tour. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'll close by reminding you that your 10-year wedding anniversary is about 6 months away. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else caught that, but let me help your wife out.
Yeah, we've been discussing what we might do. No plans yet, but we might go away and leave the kid. We'll see.
Good for you. Well, thanks so much. That's it. That's the pod for today.
All right. Thank you.